Hey, welcome everyone. It is Thursday, February 29th, leap year this year. 6 a.m., half an hour before the market is set to open. Earlier this morning when I got up, we had the same tone that we had the last several days where we had that slightly negative sentiment, but we have a lot of economic reports, in particular the personal income and outlays that happened at 5:30. So we'll see if that picture changed. Before we take a look at the futures, I just want to let everyone know that tomorrow there will not be a pre or post market session because there's a lot of things on my plate tomorrow. However, sometime after the market closes or over the weekend, I will record a video analyzing the markets. So no live sessions tomorrow. So let's go ahead and take a look at that futures report or see how futures are coming in. Oh, and they're positive. That's surprising. So earlier, when I had woken up, it was a negative tone. We are at the verge of non-randomness in the NASDAQ to the downside. Right now, we are positive. We are distinctly positive on the NASDAQ. So almost, let's say about 50 to 60 basis points, somewhere, so about 55 basis points. The S&P 500 about 30 basis points, so at the verge of being non-random to the top side, and then Dow Jones up a tiny bit. The Nasdaq swinging, making a swing from almost non-random to the downside now to definitively non-random to the upside. So that must have been our economic reports. Let's take a look at that. Well, actually, let's look at here. Yeah, right exactly at 5:30. So there's a slew of reports at 5:30, joblessness, personal income, Chicago PMI, pending home sales, or actually those didn't happen yet. Really, so it's these two. Jobless claims definitely didn't do it. So it was personal income and outlays. And our PCE year on year is what we care about the most. And that went down from 2.6 to 2.4, right in line with consensus. But the market is happy enough with consensus, seeing that it actually came down. So that is a potential signal that the Fed can safely lower rates sometime this year. Sometime the current timeline is summer, sometime starting in the summer. So this makes it more likely that it will start in the summer rather than later on in the year. Let's take a quick look at core PCE year on year, 2.9 down to 2.8, right on consensus. So that came down a tiny bit as well also. So that's the enthusiasm in the markets. But as you can see, we're not flying high. This isn't going to be a huge gap up in the markets. So let's take a look. Let's take that in context on the daily chart and see how everything looks like it's going to open up. The S&P 500, I got to move. There you go. So on the pre-market, it looks like we're going to move up. So still significantly below the psychological resistance right here. What we wanted to see today is if we would bounce off of that EMA 8 or if we were going to fall below it and potentially start challenging that EMA 20. Based on the open, it looks a little bit more likely to go to the upside or just chop sideways. So in any case, if it chops sideways, it would still be above the EMA 8. That gives us a little bit more confidence that this upward slope or this uptrend can continue. However, we do need to see it be able to very easily and comfortably break above this psychological resistance right here around 510. So far, we came up to that level and we rejected it. And now we'll see if today is the beginning of us challenging it again, or we have to wait that whole entire next week to see if we're going to challenge either to the upside or to the downside. We look at QQQ. QQQ is getting most of the benefit of those reports. It was very heavily favoring the NASDAQ, so 50, 60 basis points versus 30 basis points over here on, so about twice as much of an effect on the NASDAQ than on the S&P 500. So that is boding well for the tech and communications, the semiconductors. But right here, looks like we'll open at the highs of the previous session. And so not yesterday, but the day before and then we'll see. We'll see if we can continue upwards, or usually if we have a little bit of a gap, then we expect us to start heading towards the previous close at the open. So that happens about 70% of the time. If we look at the QQQ, then what we would expect is it to start heading down towards that previous close right here. Now there's a lot of levels in between. Let me just draw them. So we might not make it all the way to that close, but we might make it at least to this first purple line, which would be near that VWAP as well. So that's a pretty good level. We'll see. We may fall into the 30% category where we don't head downwards, but there is a pretty good chance that we'll move downwards. And then after that, then the market will show its real direction, whether it's going to keep on moving down or move back upwards or just chop sideways like we've been seeing. Well, I guess we've been directional during the day. So we've been throughout the day, but by the close, we haven't been that directional for several days now. So we'll see if that continues. If it does continue, then that's a pretty strong sign of indecision. Institutions still waiting for something to stimulate this market. If it's not going to be the PCE report, then there's not that much else that can do it. So that would be a argument towards us just chopping sideways and then making a decision when we hit these highs, all-time highs, or when we hit the downtrend. So at some point we're going to get squeezed in between and we'll have to make a decision on the direction. Dow Jones also moving upwards. So that's interesting. Even though we don't have nearly as big of an effect on the Dow Jones and that futures, only up about 10 basis points, 10, 15 basis points, we are set to open at the previous days, the 2 days ago's close. That's a pretty big movement upwards. And if we looked at the S&P 500, about the same movement, maybe slightly less movement than the S&P 500. So even though we're not up a lot, excuse me, basis point wise, that represents a similar move relative to its own price action, which means the price action of the Dow Jones was narrower than the S&P 500 and the QQQ over the last week. So not a lot of money has moved into that, which is okay because we had the emphasis on the tech sectors this week anyways. But what we're saying is that there's not a lot of flight to safety within the equities market. So if there is a slight flight to safety, it's money leaving the markets, leaving the equity markets at least. And if it's leaving the equity markets, then that is going to be a quicker drain. If we do break down, then money, we're not going to expect it to stay in the equities markets. We'll expect it to bleed out. For example, yesterday we saw it in Bitcoin. So if money actually leaves the market, that's going to cause a downward movement faster than if we just rotated sectors. So that's interesting to note. Let's take a look at how that report affected TLT. It should be pretty positive. And so it looks like we're going to open closer to the top of this range right here. So can it break out above this? Well, we would have to break out. If we did, it would break out above these all-time highs. And today, I don't think that's very likely. It may be over the next 2 or 3 days, but not in a single day. I don't think we'll just break very cleanly above that psychological resistance. I think it would hold for at least 1 day. So we don't expect this to break above this range today. And our VIX is down. So the market makers liked that report quite a bit, actually. So this is what I was talking about earlier in the day, morning, I guess I should say, earlier in the morning, the futures were down. So our VIX was up and we came down quite significantly after those reports. So the market makers are feeling very comfortable about how things are going to trade. And so we'll expect the trading range to be a little bit more muted since we're more confident and maybe slightly leaning towards the upside. Okay, I think that's it because it's not too meaningful to look at the sectors. Obviously, the attention is concentrated within the QQQ. So that would indicate the tech and consumer discretionary. So tech, retail, consumer discretionary, communications, semiconductors, all of those will probably get the most attention today. They're already, at least the sector itself or the index itself is getting more attention than the other broader markets. So those are the ones to watch, but those are also the ones to be careful of. If you do trade them to the upside, I would recommend taking a short-term view. So a day trading view, holding 1 or 2 days type of view. Actually, I would just say 1 day because we've got the weekend coming up. So I wouldn't get too enthusiastic. Right now, we do have our uptrend in place and it looks like it will be defended. However, that psychological resistance could prove to be quite strong. So we want to take a shorter term view, just be a little bit safer. We want our portfolios pointed upwards, but not super high. We want to be very judicious about the sectors that we choose to be long in. So that's what I was saying. If you choose to trade QQQ stocks, the consumer discretionary and the tech stocks, go very short term would be my personal recommendation. That is going to be all. The PCE report just dominates everything. It's not really meaningful to look at anything else because all attention is going to be on the PCE reports and the effect of those PCE reports for today. And then something else, the market will forget about the PCE report pretty quickly. It's not going to have multi-day influence. It will definitely have influence today. Maybe tiny bit influence tomorrow. Since it's Friday, we usually get this report on Fridays, and then we have the weekend to digest it. But we got it early this week or this time. So we've got today to trade it and tomorrow to trade it. And then Monday we'll be back to normal, or at least we'll be back. Well, we won't be feeling the effects of the PCE report. So that is it for today. Have a wonderful and profitable session, and I will not see you tomorrow. I will not be live tomorrow morning or afternoon, but I will have a recorded session sometime after the markets close or potentially over the weekend. Have a wonderful weekend, you guys, and I will see you live on Monday.